Can you be apolitical or non-political? In France and many other countries, when people mention topics such as gender, race, class, economic inequalities or climate change, people often try to stop the conversation saying stop talking politics. Similarly, when producing content for social media or advertising, big companies usually say that they avoid producing or sponsoring content that they feel is too political. What does it mean, and is it even possible to be apolitical or non-political? This video is only a reflection of my own thoughts, and it has no much scientific basis because I'm not a historian, I'm not a linguist. However, I had to try to define the word of politics and being political for my PhD in 2016, which was adapted into the book Young Muslim Changemakers, because as I mentioned in the intro, well, what does it mean when people in France find Muslims just for wearing certain clothes or having some facial hair being too political? As usual, I like to start with the origin of the words, their etymology. And let's start with the Greek origins of politics. If we follow the Greek definition, we are all political beings, willingly or not. Aristoteles, in his Politics Volume 1, said that we are all political animals, and this for a good reason. In ancient Greece, politics was not what we are seeing nowadays on TV or social media. In ancient Greece, it was very much to do with the life of the city. What we call politics, in Greek, bios, politikos, literally means life, bios, of the city, the polis, the politikos. So every single thing relating to the life of the society and of the city was therefore a political matter. So if you lived in a city being a citizen, your mere existence was making you part of the bios politikos, a political subject and actor. So later on with time, people have extended the concept of politics to the ruling of said cities and societies. Because unlike animals, for which relations are often built through power or reproductive capabilities, the survival and the thriving of the human species relies on criteria that are not necessarily obvious or seen, and people have to use reason or their guts to determine who could be an ally, who could be an enemy, or who could we include in our social group. So it has become essentially a set of rules tied to a form of citizenship to manage, include, or reject certain subject, so the society could work as the people governing it wanted to. And this leads us to my second point, that we are all political subjects because of our very individual characteristics. So as a continuation of these strategies of protection of the city, people have, across the world and across ages, tried to categorize people as either subjects, allies, or enemy based on various characteristics. Their place of birth, their parents' place of birth or citizenship, their tribe, their religious beliefs, but also their language, the color of their skin, and much, much more. And these conversations, these discussions are still ongoing nowadays across the world. Who we do consider as part of our country, or as people say, our national identity. If you look at some tests for, let's say, acquiring the British or the French citizenship, you will notice that they contain linguistic and cultural elements. The problem is with anything related to culture is that it is not exact science, and the variables have been moving and changing like all across time. Let's see, for example, how certain citizens of certain countries can be denied entry to another country during a certain number of years under one government, and once the government changes, they are now allowed entry. So in some countries, by law, we might remember or have read in our history, school books, how even being of a different skin color would allow you rights different to the standard for other citizens. And even in the past, people of this same color but of a different ethnicity would face a different treatment from citizens of a country. For example, the Irish, when there was a huge wave of anti-Irish sentiment in Britain. So at the end of the day, any of our very unique characteristics are making us political subjects, willing or not, because we can be judged upon them and therefore allowed or denied certain rights or treatment. Which leads us to my third point, that being apolitical or not political is a paradox. So back to France, where people think that wearing certain clothes makes people being political activists. Do all the people who accuse others of being political have looked at themselves and can call themselves apolitical or non-political? Because these are often people who appear in a certain dress, they're like a three-piece suit, tells something about your social economic status, very approximately. But for example, if you even take the tube and you are dressed in like a worker's fatigues with a toolbox, it says something about your social economic status, your possible occupation, and therefore your possible and potential political interests in terms of legislation. Even the fact of being male is a political fact, because let's not forget that we have societies across the world that treat men differently to other genders, whether it is through culture or through the law. And I'm saying genders because in Europe and North America, lots of people believe there is only two genders, but in countries like Pakistan, there is a third gender officially recognized by the law, which is the Khwaja Sira. But this is another story. Then there is companies that refuse to sponsor or produce content that they find too political. In these same companies are producing and advertising on their website, for example, campaigns for disabled people, or for relieving poverty in Asia or Africa, or very bold statements about doing something about climate change. But how do these statements can be considered non-political? In that case, you might be apt at recognizing that these companies are obviously taking sides. They are taking sides against economic inequalities, against the different treatment of disabled people, and they side with people who believe that climate change is real. By experience, having worked with some of these big companies that say, if you do something, try not to do anything political. As of 2022, what do they mean is they don't want to work on anything that will upset a large number of people. Meaning, as of 2022, it includes anything that has to do with women's rights, gender rights, black people's rights, indigenous rights, climate change to some extent, but it's getting mainstream, or even worse, like religious rights. So what they consider political or not, it's a mere decision of weighting profits versus backlash and potential costs. For example, lots of companies have been more willing in the UK specifically to engage specifically with Muslims as a niche market, trying to tailor advertisements specifically for Eid festivals, for example. They have usually received a very severe backlash. But then if the profits outweigh the losses and the backlash, then why not? Because let's remember, companies are for profit and they function in terms of profit, losses and risk, rather than whether they're siding on the right side of history or not. In conclusion, if anyone tells you that you are being too political, well, this is a thought-terminating cliché. The translation is, they want you to shut up and stop talking. or similar statements such as you're being argumentative, you're making drama, you're making a big deal of things. And this is simply because usually the person, this is more a psychology, who says that to you is feeling uncomfortable because either they are not ready to be challenged, or they know deep inside that they're holding an opinion which is arbitrary and not really well thought, or third option, they are perhaps scared of hearing a truth that would potentially make them look bad, so they're feeling insecure. So at the end of the day, to conclude this video, just feel comfortable being a political being, because willingly or not, whether we like it or not, there's little we can do to change that, because it has to do with our very characteristics, even our innate one. However, let's pay attention to where do others put boundaries and of what they find acceptable or not. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and see you next time.